In this video, I'm going to demonstrate how I built this client website with AI. We sold this for about $8,000. This is a real client website, and it's about $300 a month in monthly recurring revenue that we do in maintenance on it. And I'm going to demonstrate in this video how you can do this with Claude Code CLI, but you can also use Claude Code with the graphical user interface, Antigravity, Codex, Cursor. Any of these sorts of agent IDEs will work, okay? So for this client, just a little bit of context. I spent about 2 hours in meetings with them, and the whole build here took me about 10 hours, which was one long day of work for me, including the planning and image curation. And mind you, that was just on the fulfillment side. I'm going to talk a little bit about the sales side, but predominantly we're going to look at the fulfillment today. Now, I also want to give you some quick math on this, just so you can see the economics. I may have spent about $20 in AI tokens on this overall. It was 12 hours of my time, and let's imagine it was 6 hours of sales time because we didn't actually spend that much time in sales on this client. That's about 18 hours total, and that comes out to an hourly rate of about $443, which is pretty great. And then they're paying us average about $300 a month on maintenance, and that's, let's say, 3 hours. That's $100 an hour. So as you can see, the economics in these are still pretty favorable. And if web design is dead, I didn't get the memo. So if you're new to the channel, I'm Matt. I'm the COO of a small 7-figure revenue marketing agency. I built a portfolio of websites for this agency that was about 100 right now, and we started from scratch. So I took it from 0 to 100 pretty much. And I've got nearly 7 years of experience building websites. I've personally made, I don't know, about $120K in profit in the last few years just doing website hosting and maintenance. And it was pretty passive, that revenue. That was just in addition to salaried work. All right, so it's a great recurring revenue source, and it's kind of my answer to the question of how do I make money online, because when I was 20 years old and in college, this was kind of the thing that I was searching, and I was looking for people to show me a business model that might work for somebody who wanted to work remote, was a little bit tech savvy. And in fact, I learned what I learned initially from a guy who was on Reddit or YouTube or something. So it does work. And that sounds like something you would be interested in. We're going to go ahead and get into it here. So first off, I want to give a little bit of theory. And if this isn't relevant to you, you can skip this part and go straight into the build. But I just want to contextualize a little bit of what we're doing here so it's not totally isolated. So additionally, I want to give you a little bit about the simplified website agency customer journey, okay? So I've broken this into 2 big buckets, marketing and sales, which I'm calling customer acquisition, and then operations. So I'm going to go through these a little bit step by step, not too long, okay? But I'm going to talk about outreach here just a little bit. There's active outbound and there's passive inbound. This is actually a great example of passive inbound outreach, okay? And as a whole, outreach is something that's talked a lot about on the internet, especially with like gurus and cold email and like cold calling and such. And the reality is that, cold calling does work, cold email can work, but the conversion rates are obviously very low. And the reality is when you look at the data and you do some basic research about agency models and how these companies generate the majority of their business, you'll see that actually disproportionately it comes from referrals and recommendations. It comes from relationships and the trust that those relationships confer. And then B2B specifically, which is kind of the context here, this almost always starts with a referral. And that was true in this case too. This trucking company that we're going to be looking at today was a referral. It was a friend of the family. And people want to do business with people they know and especially who they like. So I'm going to repeat that. People want to buy, especially in sales, from people that they know and they like. Okay, so that's really important here to remember. And then additionally, the sales sentiment is just that strong relationships are a big part of this, apologies, and disproportionately it is relationship driven, okay? So from the outreach portion, next you move into the response and the deliberation cycle. This is just kind of the sales cycle. I'm dubbing it thusly here because it's the part where, if you're doing outreach outbound, the client responds and deliberates and you help them decide, if the product is a good fit for them, what's it gonna cost them? And on the flip side, if it's inbound, the response might come actually from the company because the customer is the one doing the outreach in a sense, right? They're initiating that conversation due to content they may have seen on the internet, something like this, for example. So from there, you're going to lead to a purchase. And of course, this is sort of a funnel, right? So you lose people at every portion of this, but eventually you filter down into those who are willing to make a purchase with you, okay? And so from there, you've kind of completed the customer acquisition portion of this and you move into operations. And that's kind of where we find ourselves here in this video. All right, so specifically, we're going to address fulfillment and delivery. And again, this video is here, but we're also going to touch on edits, maintenance, and this assists retention because it's a hell of a lot cheaper to keep a client you already have than to have to go and get a new one. So that's kind of a big portion of this, and simplifying the edits and maintenance on a website specifically is something that's really useful, okay? And then I want to give a quick note here as well. This was a comment that I got from some people that they didn't understand the difference between an agent harness and the actual LLM model. This is developing technology, so no worries at all if you weren't familiar with this. And if you are, you can skip it. But I wanted to clarify this for people who don't know. Okay, so like these AI agent tools, Claude Code, Antigravity, they're basically 2 separate things glued together. So firstly, you have the agent harness, and this is essentially a computer program that enables the AI language models to read files, make edits, and do things essentially, right? So it also is responsible for sending your instructions to the AI, and it's installed on your computer. So this is the software, Antigravity, Cursor, Claude Code. Meanwhile, you've got the large language model itself. This is the actual AI. It does the thinking, the code writing, and it's usually not installed in your computer and it lives in a big data center. It just sends you its work over the internet. Okay, so this is actually Claude, ChatGPT, Gemini. Those are the names of the models. And these generally require powerful computers. So you're not often going to run these locally, but it is possible if you have specialized consumer hardware to run some of these, though these models are proprietary and you would not be able to use those on your own computer. Okay, so just an analogy to help clarify this a little bit. This is a bit like a remote-controlled rover on Mars, the harness, right? So it can do a bunch of stuff, but it has to be intelligently controlled via remote. This is the body and not the brain. Meanwhile, you've got some guy in NASA's control room sitting there eating a bag of chips and playing with remote control. He presses a button, the rover does something. This is tool calling, and you'll hear about this in the AI agent space. And so imagine he can also speak through the rover speakers in case he meets a little green man on Mars, and he needs to say that we come in peace, all right, so don't get our asses blown up. So this is token streaming, right? So the AI is literally streaming its words, its tokens to you over the internet. And so that is how you end up with the written files that you end up with when you're using an AI agent tool like this, okay? So just to provide that context, that's what we're working with in terms of the actual journey, the place that we're at. It's down here in fulfillment and delivery, and then the difference between these two concepts, all right? So I want to give you a little bit of context additionally on the process that we're going to use here. So first, optionally, this would be a step 1 kind of a thing, or step 0 here. And here's what I would say. If you're working with a website client here that already has an online presence and you just want to gather the data about them, because you're going to have to do this when you build a website. You're going to have to search for their social links. If it's retail, you're going to search for store hours. You've got to get some information about them, usually the text from their existing website, that kind of a thing. So you're going to have to do that manually, or you could use something like this, like Firecrawl's agent, which is essentially a web crawler hooked up to an AI agent that can run around the web and summarize and synthesize text that it finds. So this can kind of give you like a full brief of everything you would need to build a website for a client. If it's just a marketing website, 5 to 10 pages kind of a thing, you could use this to do pretty much all the data gathering. So that's something you might consider checking out. Once we're done coding the site, we're going to push it to GitHub. We're going to have the agent do that. We're going to authenticate with GitHub. The agent will help us. And we're going to deploy to Cloudflare pages for free where it's going to live and be hosted. Okay, that'll be over here. You can make a free Cloudflare Cloudflare account, and then you can use workers and pages. We're going to use pages to deploy this because that's the super cheap free one, and it doesn't cost virtually anything at all. And then afterward, this is sort of the optional management step if you plan on doing these at scale. You'd come over to V0, which is Vercel's AI editor agent, but it all lives on the web. And so you can basically hook your GitHub code, your repo, up to this and have the editor do all the edits for you kind of centrally. You'll have a visual preview of the website, and you can then prompt it just like you would on the local coding that we're going to do here. The benefit, though, is that it's centralized, and if you've got 100 of these things at once, you can have your team log into one singular web interface to make edits, which is a lot easier than trying to pull these things on and off GitHub, all right? So real quickly here is the prompt I've pre-built to get this working, and here's what I'm going to feed into the AI agent here. So I'm asking it to make me a homepage for this website. We're just gonna start with the homepage. I tend to find that it works better if you start with just a singular page and then try to go from there rather than one-shotting multiple pages. And then we're gonna give it the color palette, the font family. We're gonna specify that the technology we wanna use is nodeJS, and we're gonna configure it for static export. That's important. That will turn essentially this into a set of just static text files and images, meaning they're not dynamic, they don't change or move, and that's what makes them able to be hosted on Cloudflare pages. So additionally from there, I've got the text that I've laid out for the homepage and the header and footer, and you would want to write this out kind of ahead of time a little bit if you want to get optimal results on the initial prompt. So I've now pasted that in, and I'm going to send that off to the agent, and it's going to think and work here for a minute, and when it comes back, we're going to go live with this and preview it. It may ask you for a little input on a few of these steps. You can just say yes, proceed, or allow all kind of a thing. That's completely fine for this sort of a context. So now that the agent has finished, what we're going to do is we're going to open up a terminal so we can preview the work. We're going to click terminal, new terminal, and then we're going to run npm run dev. This will open up a development server for us and give us a localhost URL, so we can go ahead and click that. Okay, so I've got this pulled up now. This is actually a pretty good start, and it's pretty close to where we started with the actual website. So if we were to go ahead and compare, we can see that there's just no images in here yet, but otherwise it's got pretty much the structure that we were looking for in terms of all the content being on here. It varies a little bit in structure, but for the most part, it's actually pretty similar. A few components have different design, but it's a good start for a singular shot. So now what I've done here is I've got the homepage media all nicely put up in a folder. These are all the images that are going to be on the website on this homepage. I've got these in WebP format. It is a lightweight format that works well for the web, and it will keep your site from getting bogged down. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy all these. I'm going to go to the public folder in our Next.js project. I'm going to create a new folder, and I'm just going to call this media. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually copy and paste all of these into it. So I'm going to open up the folder here, find the media folder, and I'm going to paste these items here into the media folder. So there we go. So if we go back to the text editor here now, we can see we've got all those images in there. What I'm going to go ahead and do now is I'm going to have the agent incorporate these. I'm going to go back to my other terminal because I have two terminals open. I have one to run the dev server, and I've got one to run the agent. So the agent is still here in this one, and I'm going to ask it to go ahead and grab these images. So the agent finished that round, and then we're going to take a look at the site. We can see that a few things are a little bit off, but getting better. So we've got the logo up there now. We've got the header image properly inserted, though this gradient could use a little bit of work. We've got these brand logos inserted, though perhaps we might want these with a different hover effect on them. And we've got a few images down here that aren't looking totally perfect, but those are in there. And then we're going to probably have to make a correction here and use a different image as well. So aside from that, pretty good, but we're going to take it to another round of revisions here. So I went ahead and gave it a few edits here. I asked it for some tweaks in the header, the hero section, the industry section. Just, you can read those if you like, but I just said, we're going to try to just tweak them verbally here and get it a little bit closer to what we had in the demo. I'm going to let it run another round here, and we're going to see what we get. So I let that run and gave it a few rounds of revisions, and here we go. We have a pretty faithful recreation. So here was the original. We maybe have a little bit more polish in this one because additionally I did spend more time on this. And there's a few things that I just left out because I didn't have this photo on hand. And we've got these cards a little bit differently designed, but for the most part, we have a pretty faithful recreation here. This would be a suitable recreation. You could sell this today pretty much as is if you just took this and fleshed out the rest of the pages. So I think that's pretty much a job well done with respect to the homepage and the design. I think it looks good. And then additionally, I want to show you how I did this image right here. What I did was I went ahead and got a photo of one of these trucks, and I'm going to take it into AI Studio right here. I'm going to go ahead and, once I've got that API key linked and created, I'm going to go ahead and drop it in right here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask this to take this image of this truck and put it driving through the Smoky Mountains with a motion blur behind it. Okay, so here's what we got from the model. This is not quite the same vibe as the one I got, but you could tweak and do this a few times to get something that was suitable for you. I'm going to show you just with this one here. I'm going to download this, and I'm going to drop this into an online photo editor called Photopea. This is like a free Photoshop recreation sort of software. I'm going to go ahead and zoom in a couple places because I have a feeling that this text is artifacted, and in fact it is. If you look closely in this image, there is AI artifacting on this. So what we're going to do is we're going to come in here and clean this up a little bit. We're going to pull the blur brush tool. We're going to make this a little bit bigger, drop the hardness down, and then we're going to paint over the stuff here where the text is artifacted noticeably, just to make sure that this looks good on the website. So if anybody were to scrutinize this a bit more closely, it wouldn't be immediately obvious that this is entirely AI generated. So right there, we look like we are good to go. Nothing too out of ordinary with this one. So that would be a usable photo right there. So I would go ahead and export that, save that, and bring that into the project. And that is functionally how I did that image right there. From here, what you would do is you would go and take the rest of the pages, flesh those out, ensure that it was mobile friendly. If it was not, you would give it a prompt to make sure it is mobile friendly and that the mobile menu is designed to your liking. But from there, you pretty much have what you need to create and sell these things. So this is basically just a portfolio website. If you need external functionality, we would have these external links. So they provided us with an application link here, so we didn't even have to handle that functionality on the page itself. When it comes to contact forms, on contact pages, you have a few options. You can either just put an email on there if it's a public-facing email. That's not going to be a massive problem if it were to get scraped, for instance. Your other option is to go to a software like this called Basin. Their website is usebasin.com. And this is a headless form software. So what you can do with this is you can basically go to this page here. They have a guide for Next.js. You would make an account, sign up for it. This is not free, I don't think. They've got $15 a month plan though. And you would basically take this right here and hand this to your AI agent, the instructions right here, and it could pretty much do this for you. And so what this does is you can take a form hooked up on a static site like we're going to do, pass it to this headless form backend, and it will handle the email routing, the spam filtering, and all of that for you. So that's going to be pretty much a good solution for most people doing static sites and needing contact forms on them. But in some cases, you can just drop the email on there, but be aware that you could get the email address scraped. Okay, so from here, we're going to pretend that we're done. I've spent about $1 in credits total with the OpenRouter API using Gemini Pro. So what we're going to do now is we're going to exit out of our session. In my case, I'm in the CLI. But what we're going to do is we're going to get this published to GitHub under our account, and then we're going to deploy it. So I'm going to go ahead and do this. I believe it's ghauth login is the command, and it's going to ask me, where do I want to use GitHub, github.com. Do I want to use HTTPS? Yes. Do I want to log in with my GitHub credentials? That's a yes. And then you can do login with a web browser. So it's going to give you a one-time code and a link, and you can copy and paste that in. Once you paste that code in the browser and get logged in to your GitHub account, if you didn't have one, you had to make one here. Okay, so go ahead and do that if you don't already have one. But then you should be able to get ready and logged in. And so now it looks like we're good to go. It's all set. So I'm going to have the agent go ahead and try to push this to my GitHub. So what I've done now is I've just gone back into the agent and I've asked it, please push this to my GitHub with the name, whatever you want. And then it's going to try to run that command. It's going to ask for verification. I'm just going to say yes, and then I'm going to let it proceed, and we'll see what it does. So it ran its commands, it's good to go, and in fact, it did create the repository in my GitHub here with the name I specified. Now, one note here, if you're using the Open Router method with the Claude Code CLI, you need to make sure that this .claude folder doesn't get pushed. I forgot to ask it to do that. You need to have it marked that with a git ignore, but if you do get it in here, you can come in here and delete it because this will have an Open Router API key in it. Now, additionally, one thing I'm noticing here is I actually also forgot to tell it to replace the favicon here. So that's this little thing up in the tab, the icon in the tab on your browser. So do have it replace that if you're going to do this. And then additionally, the other thing you want to configure is the open graph tags, meta tags. So this will be kind of like the images and the text that show when you put this on a social media page or when you send something like via iMessage, it'll pull up a little image and some text. Those come from the open graph tag. So if that's not already configured and you didn't explicitly prompt the agent to do that, make sure that you tell it to do that so you have those. Then another thing to note here is you'll want to come to the repository that you've created and go to settings in general. Come down all the way to the bottom and make sure that the visibility for this repository is not public. You generally don't want to do this unless you're making something that's open source. You're going to want to make sure to change that to private. Okay. Now, one other thing to note here is you don't want your AI agent creating environment files like .envs with secret keys or API keys because this is going to be a static site and all the files on a static site can be seen publicly on the web. So if you're going to be deploying to Cloudflare pages, you need to get the site deployed. And if you need to use something like server-side sort of functions where you need to fetch, like let's say a Facebook feed, for instance, and you have a Facebook API key or access token, what you would need to do is on Cloudflare, for instance, because these are static pages, they don't have the ability to run server functions like that. So what you'd have to do is you'd have to create a Cloudflare worker, and that is something that can run serverless code, basically. So just ensure that you don't have secret or API keys hard-coded into any of these files here. Now, that being said, we are pretty much ready to deploy this. So we're going to come and create a Cloudflare account if we don't already have one. We're going to find workers and pages, and you can do this entirely for free, mind you. You don't have to put in billing information. It's going to say, do you want to create a worker? You don't want to do that. You want to go to pages down here and say import an existing Git repository. You're going to log into your GitHub account that you had made. You're going to find the one that you want to deploy. There it is, and I'm going to go ahead and click begin setup. So if the project name here will be used to create a pages.dev URL where the site will live, you can configure and hook up a custom domain to this if you like, so you won't have to see this. We're going to go ahead and deploy the main production branch. We didn't do any branching with this, but it's sort of a way that in GitHub you have the option to create branches where you can work off the main or have some kind of new development branch that's like a version ahead, for instance. Okay, so the framework preset here, we're going to go down and find Next.js with static HTML export, and it will configure this stuff properly for us. Then we're going to go ahead and we're just going to make sure it all looks good. Then we're going to go ahead and deploy it. We're going to let that run, and we're going to come back here in a second. So if you hit any hiccups in that step, it might be because your project was not configured for static export, but mine went through properly. So if yours hits a hiccup, make sure you go back to the coding agent and say, make sure you configure this for static export, and then it should be good. You'll see that it's created a page here and it's deployed it. So this is now live on the web at the URL on the pages.dev. Now we might want to clean up that URL a little bit, but otherwise the site is now live and good, and we can take it into V0 for centralizing the management a little bit. However, before I do that, I am just going to quick show you how to do a custom domain on this because you probably don't want to deploy a client site on pages.dev. So you will come to the workers and pages project that you just deployed. You're going to click on custom domains and you're going to click set up a custom domain here. So you're going to input the domain that you have, and then it's going to say, hey, here's a CNAME record. And then it's going to ask you to add that to the domain registrar on the DNS records for that domain. So go ahead and do that and then come back and you can authenticate it here. And then when that all goes through, you should be able to access the website at the custom domain and not just the pages.dev URL anymore. So that is how that works. You will have to purchase your own domain at a registrar of your choice. I don't know if Cloudflare currently sells them, but you can do Porkbun as a cheap one. You can do GoDaddy if you really want to hate yourself. And you can also do things like Namecheap. So those are a couple good options for you. I use Porkbun personally. Great. So we talked earlier about the management side of things and how when we're messing with GitHub, Git operations are kind of messy. You don't want to have to do a ton of that all day if you've got like 10, 20, 100 of these things. So what we're going to do is I'm going to suggest you come into V0, make an account here. You can use the free plan with a free team, but if you've got multiple people working on this, you might want to upgrade to the paid plan, but you can certainly start for free. You get a small amount of free credits. It's not a lot, but it will be enough to probably handle a small edit on a singular site. But if you are going to use this, do expect to pay for it, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and connect our GitHub account so we can import from GitHub. I've got mine connected, and then I should be able to see this one right here, and that's the one we just made. So I'm going to click import, and it's going to run the process here. It's going to ask me a few things. It's going to say, what's the base branch? Yep, we're using the main one. And then I'm going to create a project. So, the other thing quickly that I want to mention here is Vercel, if you deploy to V0 like this, is going to try to create a Vercel deployment because, like Cloudflare, Vercel hosts websites. And if you deploy this without configuring anything to say, basically, do not deploy to Vercel, it's going to create two deployments, one to Cloudflare, one to Vercel. So I'm going to show you how you can quickly tell the AI agent to ignore Vercel. So to prevent the automatic V0 deployments, you need to come into your project's root folder and create a file that is vercel.json. And then you need to paste in this particular snippet here, it's going to be get, deployment enabled false. Make sure you have that, and then it will not deploy automatically to vercel when you pull this into v0. And then if you've made that change after you've already got this in GitHub and not prior, then you're going to have to go ahead and tell the agent to push the change that you just made back to GitHub. So this is how you make sure it updates in GitHub. You're not going to have to do this afterward if you're using v0. That's kind of what we're avoiding, all these pushes and pulls and stuff. So I'm just going to tell it to do that, but make sure that it does push to GitHub so you have the version with the no deploy to vercel essentially. And the other option here is you can also just come to GitHub directly in the repo, and you can just click create new file, and you could do the exact same thing, just naming it vercel.json and pasting that code in there. That's another option for you. So once that's done, we're going to come back to vercel. We're just going to click create project. It's going to pull it in. So there you go. If you've done that, it should pull your code from GitHub into v0 here, and it should render it as a live preview editor. Okay. So then you can make changes here with the agent live on the web. And then what you can do when you're done making edits is you will hit create pull request here, and then it's going to create a pull request, and then you're just going to click merge pull request, and that will essentially push the changes you've made into your GitHub. All right, so it's a little bit different than doing a push. This is a pull request, and then you're sort of merging the pull request versus just pushing it directly. But that's how v0 works, and that's how you can update your GitHub. And then once that happens and the change occurs in GitHub, Cloudflare is a continuous integration, continuous deployment platform, which means that as the code changes into GitHub, Cloudflare is going to detect that and automatically redeploy the newest version of the site. So with Pages, I think you get some fixed amount of deployments per month. Yeah, so with Cloudflare Pages free, you get 500 builds per month. That should be more than enough to last you for quite a few clients, and you get one build at a time, so you can't really do this with a bunch of team members. If you have a team, it goes up to 20, and then you've got 5,000 builds and quite a bit more. So that is how it works with Pages. And from here, your clients are going to send in edit requests and all that, and you're just going to go ahead and make your changes here in v0. It will automatically update the site, and you're good to go. This is static hosted, and you don't really have to worry about databases to hack. Just keep your Cloudflare account secure and your v0 account secure and your GitHub, all with two-factor authentication, and you should be pretty much good to go. So that is a quick look about how I do these for clients. I do this for pretty much anybody who's coming in with a custom website request. Obviously, I give it a little bit more time and polish than you might have seen in this video, but this is generally the gist of it. And this is how most people do this nowadays. So it's become pretty accessible. So if you haven't had any experience in this before, it's really a pretty good time to start. And this kind of has replaced the traditional agency model of using WordPress and page builders. So we still have a fair bit of abstraction away from the code. We don't have to touch it ourselves personally in this kind of a model. And so as a result, this kind of works in extension for what the needs that the page builders used to solve. So I hope this was helpful to you. And if you have any questions about this, let me know down in the comments. But otherwise, I will see you in the next one.